What is up, guys? So we just hit 700 subscribers, and I am super duper appreciative to all of you guys who always watch and comment and just show your support for this channel. As appreciation for hitting 700, we are going to be doing a villain analysis of Venom Goblin, and we're going to cover standard a little bit, but I'm mostly going to be going over expert mode, just looking through his cards and discussing some strategies and some stuff that I like to take advantage of whenever I'm facing Venom Goblin. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're gonna first start off with the setup here. So for the contents, we have Venom Goblin, 1 and 2 for standard, and then 2 and 3 for expert mode. And then we include the Venom Goblin set right here with the Venom Goblin words in the little thing. And then we also include the Symbiotic Strength modular set, the standard set, and then it recommends that we also put Goblin gear. For the setup, it says to put Lower Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, and Upper Manhattan main schemes into play. Place the glider counter on the Midtown Manhattan. Flip this card and set it aside. So when this card flips over, it reviews the Skies Over New York permanent environment right here. And this just gives you some rules for how you're playing this scenario. And then we have Lower Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, and Upper Manhattan. So Venom Goblin is a little bit different from every other scenario because there are 3 main schemes here, and they each add 1 threat every single turn, right? 1 times player threat. And then if one of them flips over, it's as if Venom Goblin is taking over that part of Manhattan. So let's say he takes over Lower Manhattan, which means that the threat out here at 11 times player. So it becomes, this is the other side of Lower Manhattan. It becomes a symbiotic environment. So all the symbiotic environments, Midtown Manhattan and Upper Manhattan, all have the same effect. Basically, it just means that Venom Goblin kind of took over that part of Manhattan. It says here, when reviewed, move the glider counter and each acceleration token from here to the main scene with the least threat. If there are at least 2 symbiotic environments in play, the players lose the game. So Venom Goblin is just trying to take over the majority of Manhattan. If he takes over 2 of these main schemes and 2 of them flip, then we lose the game. If he takes over 1, we're still okay. So that is a lot to kind of take in. But one thing that, the way that I kind of look at it is that, yes, there's going to be a ton of threat, right? Because they all go up by 1 every single turn or 1 times player. So it's minimum, 3 threat going up every single turn. If you're playing multiplayer, right, 2 players, each one goes up by 2. So it's a total of 6 threat because there's 3 main schemes. So you have to do a lot of thwarting, a lot of threat management on these schemes. But the scheme threat thresholds are actually pretty high, right? Lower Manhattan is at 11, Midtown is at 12, and Upper Manhattan is at 10. So even though there's so much like actual threat going on there, in order to flip each scheme, it's actually a pretty high threat threshold. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but there's a lot of opportunity for you to flip down basically and take advantage of strong Arch Ego actions, which in my opinion is kind of the key to defeating Venom Goblin. Just getting that board set up and taking advantage of the ability to have to use your Alter Ego, to use Alter Ego cards, just stuff like that, gives you a huge advantage to kind of balance out all that threat removal that you have to deal with in hero form. Or not in hero form, but just in the scenario. Like usually when you flip back to hero form, you have to start dealing with that threat. Okay, so let's take a look at the Skies Over New York permanent environment. So this just kind of gives you the guidelines of how you want to play these main schemes here. So player cards that affect the main scheme can apply to any main scheme. So if you have some card that says like remove threat from the main scheme, then it can be any one of these 3 main schemes, right? Any player cards that's affecting the main scheme can count as any one of them. But encounter cards that affect the main scheme only apply to the scheme with the glider counter, including the placing of acceleration tokens. So even though every single well, let's just read the last one too. So each main scheme accumulates threat each round according to its acceleration value and any acceleration tokens on that scheme. So all 3 main schemes will go up by 1, right? They all go up by 1 every single turn whenever the villain phase begins during that step 1 of the villain phase. But any encounter cards or acceleration icons or tokens only apply to whatever is active main scheme, right? So it says in setup, we put the active glider counter on Midtown Manhattan. So it starts off here. So anything that the villain is doing, where the villain schemes, then they're only scheming on this main scheme, the active one. And there's a lot of cards that move that active glider counter, so you always have to be mindful which one is the current active main scheme. But yeah, I mean, there's only going to be one main scheme in terms of the villain's effects, even though for us, we can consider all three as main schemes. So manipulating the main schemes and kind of strategizing on which scheme has the glider counter is the other big key to facing Venom Goblin. Okay, so let's see. So, and now I do want to go over the clarification for the ruling for acceleration tokens, because it is a little bit confusing. So encounter cards only apply to scheme with a glider counter, right? Including the placing of acceleration tokens. So if let's see, if the villain decks out, right, or if you're playing Deadpool for whatever reason, and it says to place an acceleration token on the main scheme, that physical acceleration token goes on whichever main scheme has the active glider counter. So if Midtown Manhattan is the current active main scheme, that acceleration gets placed on Midtown Manhattan, and it will stay on Midtown Manhattan even if the new active main scheme becomes Lower Manhattan. The acceleration tokens never ever move. Whenever they go in a scheme, they stay there permanently, and that's kind of how it's been for every scenario in the game. I don't know if that will change in the future, but as of right now, there is no way to get rid of acceleration tokens that have touched a main scheme. If any of the like Midtown Manhattan gets taken over and becomes a symbiotic environment, right? If it flips over to Midtown Manhattan over here because the threat threshold that threats out, then that is the only time where it says here move each acceleration token from here to the main scheme with the least threat. So the acceleration token is effectively not moving until this main scheme actually pops, right? So whenever it pops, that's the only time where you will move that acceleration token, and it will just go on whatever scheme has the least threat, and the active main scheme will also become the one that has the least threat. And then I do want to emphasize a little bit for the acceleration icons, right? So if we take a look at, let's see, Festering Mass here, right? This is a side scheme that has this acceleration icon, right? This icon is a lot different than how the acceleration token works for Venom Goblin. So let's say it's step one of the villain phase, and let's say Midtown Manhattan is your active main scheme, and you have that Festering Mass, that acceleration icon. So you add one threat to Lower Manhattan as normal. You add one threat to Upper Manhattan as normal. And on Midtown Manhattan, since it is the current active glider counter main scheme, it gets two threat during step one of the villain phase. So the acceleration icon is flexible for whatever the current main scheme is. So if the active glider counter is on Upper Manhattan, the acceleration icon will only affect Upper Manhattan. If it's Midtown, only affects Midtown. If it's Lower Manhattan, it only affects Midtown Manhattan, right? Because it says here that encounter cards that affect the main scheme, like acceleration icons, only apply to the scheme with the glider counter, right? So the acceleration token stays after you put it on, but the acceleration icons just go to whatever the current main scheme is. So it's a little bit flexible that way too. So you just have to be mindful of where you're putting that threat on. So basically, Venom Goblin, he is, Norman Osborn. He's the Green Goblin, and he's flying over Manhattan with this active glider, and then basically, or the glider, I guess, right? His advanced glider. I guess it's not the advanced glider because he'll get it, but basically, he's just flying over, New York, Manhattan, with the glider, and he's trying to take over every single part of New York and convert into symbiotic environments. And if he converts two of them, then that's the majority, so he kind of wins. And if he defeats you, then he also wins. And the only way to beat him is to get his hit points down to 0 and defeat him before he converts all of these environments here. So this, to me, is one of the most epic scenarios in Marvel Champions. It feels super thematic, even though he's not a real villain in the Marvel comics. I mean, we all know Venom, we all know Green Goblin, like they're iconic villains, and it's kind of, it's the Green Goblin if he took the Venom, symbiote suit and got the symbiote on him, right? So he's just like super buffed up, super strong, like super crazy looking, like he looks super deranged. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So this is definitely my favorite scenario in Marvel Champions for that awesome feeling. But it is a very very difficult scenario as well. Okay, so we went over that. Let's go over Venom Goblin's actual cards now. Now that we kind of understand how the scenario works and how it plays like thematically. So I'm only gonna go over a little bit on stage one because I'm assuming if you're watching this, you want to see more of analysis on playing him on expert. So on expert, you're gonna be using stage 2 to start off with, and then you end with stage 3. And if you defeat stage 3, then you win. On standard, it's gonna be start off on stage 1, and then you just have to defeat stage 2 to win the game. Okay, so let's take a look at stage 1 really quick. So he has 2 scheme, 2 attack. He has 16 times player hit points. He does have steady, so if you stun him, you have to stun him twice. Confuse him, you just confuse him twice to fully block out an activation. His force response here is Infest the Sea. After Venom Goblin activates against you, move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat. Choose to either place 2 threat on that scheme or resolve its special ability. So you're going to see a lot of Venom Goblin's cards revolve around the special ability of the main schemes, and there is a lot of boost effects, so those star icons. Okay, let's take a look at the main schemes specials so we kind of understand what's going on with that. Okay, so the special here is to place 1 threat on each scheme if a symbiote environment is in play, right? So if one of them flip over to a symbiote environment, lower Manhattan right here, it says location symbiote, then you also place 1 additional threat on this scheme. So especially when you just start out the game, you're only gonna have to deal with placing 1 threat on each scheme. You don't have to worry about the second part unless you have a symbiote environment in play by whatever means, and usually it's gonna be because one of them got taken over in a symbiote environment. So it's just kind of punishing you if you let one of the main schemes flip. So you ideally want all 3 schemes to, not get taken over by Venom Goblin. But if one of them does get taken over, it's not the end of the world, it just has a more detrimental effect. For mid-time Manhattan, it says the special is to take 2 indirect damage. If a symbiote environment is in play, take 1 additional indirect damage. So just 1 more indirect damage. And then for upper Manhattan, it says discard 1 card from your hand as a special. If a symbiote environment is in play, discard top 4 cards of your deck. So basically, this one is going to add 1 threat on every single scheme, and this will include side schemes that are in play. And then you put additional 1 on this one. So this one will just get 2 if a symbiote environment is in play. This one is taking just 2 indirect damage, so you can place them however you want on any characters that you control. And if a symbiote environment is in play, you got to take another one, so it's going to be 3 indirect damage. And then this one is just discarding a card from your hand. And if a symbiote environment is in play, you have to discard top 4 cards of your deck as well. So when you look at Venom Goblin's effect right here, Infest the City, every single time he activates, so it's going to happen, it's a force response. You must trigger it, and it's going to be after he activates. So if he attacks or if he schemes against you, right after that activation, you move the glider counter to whatever scheme has the least threat, and you choose to either place 2 threat on that scheme or resolve its special. And then one thing I do want to clarify with the 3 main schemes here, right? So let's say all 3 main schemes have 0 threat, right? So they're all equal, right? And the active glider counter is on lower Manhattan here, for example, right? So after he activates, it says move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat. So since they all have 0, you must move it because it wants you to move the glider counter. And then wherever you move it to, since they both have 0 here on Midtown Manhattan and Upper Manhattan, you can choose which one because they're both 0. Because all the text says is to move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat. But if Lower Manhattan has 0 threat, Midtown has 1, and Upper Manhattan has 1 threat. So Lower Manhattan is the active glider main scheme, and it has the least threat. Then you will not move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat because Lower Manhattan is already the scheme with the least threat. So then it will just stay on here, and you will just choose to either place 2 threat on Lower Manhattan or resolve its special, right? So that's kind of how his mechanics work. It's a little bit difficult to get a grasp on, but after you start playing him for a while, then it just be a little bit more intuitive. Like you just move whenever you can, or just whatever the lowest one, it just stays on there. So Venom Goblin is actually one of the scenarios that I think has the biggest difference between standard and expert mode, and I think he's actually much easier on standard. I think that on standard he's not even like a top 10 villain in the game, like if you're comparing all villains in standard. But on expert mode he's like a top 2 for sure, and a lot of people think that he's the hardest villain. I would have him rolling like neck and neck, like 1A and 1B. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference between standard and expert, and there's 2 big reasons for that, right? I'm gonna go over the first reason, and then the second reason is a little bit more obvious. But the first one is because you can choose to place 2 threat on that scheme or resolve its special. So that gives you so much versatility. If the active glider counter, let's say, goes on Lower Manhattan, right, and especially to place 1 threat on each scheme, you don't have to trigger that special. You can choose to just place 2 threat on Lower Manhattan, or you can do the special here, right? So if you rather have the threat more spread out, then just resolve the special. If you rather have just the threat on Lower Manhattan, then just put it on Lower Manhattan, right? If you have it on Midtown Manhattan, for example, right, it says take 2 indirect damage. If 2 indirect damage will kill you, just put 2 threat on there. If putting 2 threat will cause this to pop, then just take the 2 indirect damage, right? So having that versatility is so powerful because you already have the versatility between the three main schemes, right? You can, if you manage the threat and make sure that this has the lowest threat, then the active glider counter will always activate this special. So you already have that going for you. And then you add in the option to choose to place two threat instead of, and you can effectively ignore the special if you place two threat, and you can do it every single time. That makes it like so versatile. It gives you so many options to really plan around it, and it really makes him a much more easy scenario to game. You still can't really game it because it's still, you know, a difficult scenario, but it's like much easier because you don't actually have to read any of the specials. You can always just put two threat on that scheme, right? And especially if there's a symbiote environment in play, right? Like if there's one of them has become flipped over to a symbiote environment, the special is place one threat on main scheme and one additional one on this one. So you can just pick the one to place two threat on that scheme and just ignore the special. So even if there's a symbiote environment play, it's still not as punishing. It's just adding more threat on that scheme, which obviously is still bad, right? I'm not saying it's easy, but I mean, it's a lot. You just have a lot more room for options whenever you're playing him on standard. Okay, so that is the first reason why he's a lot easier on standard. And the other reason is he doesn't have a when reviewed effect. So if you take a look at stage 2 here and stage 3, when reviewed, deal 2 face down encounter cards to each player. When reviewed here, deal 3 face down encounter cards to each player. So this is very similar to the mutagen formula Green Goblin, right? He's dealing you 2 face down encounter cards, which is terrible because you get dealt one more during the final step of the villain phase, or step 3 of the villain phase, I mean. So you're going to have 3 face down encounter cards in stage 2, and in stage 3 here you get dealt 3, so you get one more during the step 3 of the villain phase, so you get 4 face down encounter cards that you have to flip over and review. So this is brutal because if he's getting like activations, he's going to activate, you know, this force response that he has in all 3. It's just going to go insane. He's going to get so many activations, accumulate so much threat, activate the special on the main scheme so much. So part of the big reason why he's so difficult on expert is because when you start off the game on stage 2, you already are starting in a hole here with these 2 face down encounter cards, and that first turn is going to be very, very rough. And if you flip him, he's going to give you 3 face down encounter cards with, you know, higher stats and a worser force response. So yeah, I think that yeah, you're facing him on standard. The biggest strategy is just to plan out 18 damage before you flip him, right? So right whenever you flip him, you just do 18 damage to stage 2 and then knock him out in one go, and you never have to review these face down encounter cards, right? So for standard, I think he's a lot easier to game because you don't start off in a deficit. You can just start building right away. You have all these versatility for the options by putting a 2 threat on the scheme instead of resolving its special. And then whenever you flip him, you can just plan that damage for you to gun him down in one shot. So I think that is the way to go in standard. You never have to deal with all these encounter cards in one turn. And you never really have to deal with stage 2 because 18 hit points is not that much for stage 2 to gun him down. Okay, so I'm going to read his force response here in stage 2, and this is usually the one that I'm dealing with because I'm always trying to gun him down, whether it's standard or expert, right? So in expert mode, I'm usually not dealing with his Reign of Terror because we're just trying to gun him down here in the stage 3 to not take those 3 face down encounter cards plus the one that he deals, so 4. Okay, so on Claim the Throne here, force response, after Venom Goblin activates against you, move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat, so same as here, and then resolve its special. So the only difference is that you don't have that versatility to place 2 threat on that scheme. You must resolve the special this time. So it's still not absolutely terrible because you still have the option to control which scheme has the least threat, and you're basically controlling which special to put it on. He does have ways to change that, but yeah, I mean, we'll go into that a little bit later, but you can still, for the most part, manipulate the main scheme that you want the special to activate on. And that's my biggest tip for facing Venom Goblin. I'm always manipulating those main schemes, and I'll go over a little bit in that in a second. But yeah, so this one is just a little bit less versatile than this one. And then with the Reign of Terror on his stage 3, force response after Venom Goblin activates against you, move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat, so same effect as the other 2. But now it says place 1 threat on that scheme and then resolve its special. So now, no matter what, you're going to accumulate threat every single time he activates, whether it's an attack activation or a scheme activation, and then you still resolve the special. So obviously this is the worst one. You don't want to be facing him in stage 3 for a long time because I'm not sure any hero can like take like 10 turns of stage 3 Venom Goblin because he's adding that threat, he's resolving the special, and he's having so many boost effects in his kit to keep adding threat, keep resolving different specials, and just moving the glider counter, have him fly all around Manhattan. So he is a very disgusting stage 3 that you don't want to spend a long time facing. He does have Retaliate 1, Stalwart, and Toughness, so he does come with a tough stats card. He has Stalwart now, so he's no longer steady. He can't be stunned or confused at all in stage 3, and Retaliate 1 is always bad as well. And then for stage 2, I forgot to mention that he does come in with here with Toughness. So if you're playing to kind of gun him down with that 18 damage, make sure that you have a way to pierce the tough or get rid of it first. Okay, so that is the Venom Goblin cards. The reason why he is known as one of the most equivalents is because of this force response with his 3 main schemes that's always dealing you that stuff, in combination with he has the same when reviewed as the Green Goblin from Munition Formula, which is already a fairly difficult scenario where he deals 2 face down counter cards to each player, and this one he deals 3. So it's a combination of those 2 things that make Venom Goblin really, really tough. And if you can stabilize after the initial one review of those encounter cards, it gives you more of an opportunity to try to build your board. And then all you're trying to do is manage those 3 schemes and then try to gun him down. Okay, so I do want to go over how I try to strategize against these 3 main schemes. So Lower Manhattan is to place 1 threat on each scheme. Let's go over the other ones a little bit first. So Midtown Manhattan is special to take 2 indirect damage, right? So if I'm in a position where I can easily heal up damage, right? Like let's say I'm playing Peter Parker Spider-Man and I'm in Alter Ego and I have Aunt May out. Aunt May heals me by 4, so taking that 2 indirect damage is not that bad. I'll have like allies or beat cops or something remove threat to make sure that Midtown Manhattan is the scheme with the lowest threat, so that I take the indirect damage and I can easily heal that back up, right? I want to manipulate those main schemes so that whichever one activates is the one that I can manage the best. If it's on Upper Manhattan, right, it says discard 1 card from your hand. If I have a hand size of, let's say, 5 in hero form, right, and then I have a 3-cost card that I know I'm going to play for sure, those 3 resources are 3 cards, and the card that I'm playing is going to be the 4th card, right? So I have 1 extra card that I'm not going to be playing anyways. So if I know for sure that that's going to happen, I'll make sure that the active glider counter goes on Upper Manhattan, right? So I'll make sure Upper Manhattan has the least threat. So after Venom Goblin activates, he makes me discard a card from my hand, which isn't bad anyways because I know I'm not playing that card, right? So just being mindful of that is going to help a lot, and making sure that it's whichever scenario is the least punishing one for you is also super duper helpful. And in Lower Manhattan here, this one is to place 1 threat on each scheme. So in my opinion, this one, it can be terrible, and it also can be the most easiest one to deal with. And when I'm playing Venom Goblin, I'm almost always making sure that Lower Manhattan is the one that activates the most, because I think that when the game begins, whenever the game starts, taking 2 indirect damage is bad because you're already starting to drop your hit points, and he's probably attacking you because you're probably in hero form. Discarding a card from your hand is terrible because that's already messing up your economy, right? If you have if you're just starting the game, your economy isn't set up yet, right? You don't have all your supports and upgrades, right? So you only have those 5 cards in your hand. Losing 1 leaves you almost with nothing to play with a lot of the times, right? So I don't like Upper Manhattan to start the game. I don't like the indirect damage to Midtown Manhattan to start the game. So placing 1 threat on each scheme, that's not that bad, right? The threat thresholds are so high here that it's okay just placing 1 additional threat on each scheme, especially in the beginning, because if it allows you to build out your board and set up, you can, in the late game, remove all of that threat. So that's usually what I'm trying to do when I'm facing Venom Goblin. But there are, caveats to that, right? So when I'm playing Captain Marvel, her draw power is insane. She's drawing so many cards. I think when I played her, I almost always left it on Upper Manhattan to be the active main scheme, because discarding 1 card from Captain Marvel's hand was completely fine. Like, she's drawing a card in Alter Ego. She has a way with Rechannel to draw a card in hero form. She's just constantly drawing cards. She has so much draw power in her kit that discarding 1 card from my hand is usually fine. It doesn't really affect anything because I still have like 5-6 cards or more in my hand. So it kind of depends on what hero that you're playing, but generally I like to kind of play by those kind of strategies, and I usually try to keep it on Lower Manhattan for generally like most heroes, just because that's the least punishing in the early game. But if you let this accumulate a lot, obviously it can be very, very bad in the late game. So yeah, that's kind of my biggest tip for Venom Goblin. And then obviously This tip is a little bit more obvious, but you want to gun down stage 3, right? So whenever you're final setup on your board and everything, get Venom Goblin as close to 0 as possible, right? Like leave him with 1 HP or 2 HP. And then the moment that you flip him to stage 3, try to get rid of this 21 hit points in one go. Because if you don't, it's going to be 3 face down encounter cards plus the 1 he deals. So at least 4 face down encounter cards. And that could end your game, right? Because it could be 4 activations. It could be anything. And he has very nasty encounter cards in his kit. So yeah, this is definitely something that I try to keep in mind. And then, yeah, one other strategy before we go into the individual cards are I love getting Shadow of the Past with Venom Goblin. So obviously there are heroes that have a very nasty Shadow of the Past. If you're playing a hero that's like that, maybe you don't want to get the Shadow of the Past. But most of the time, the cards in the Shadow of the Past, your Nemesis cards, that Nemesis minion, that side scheme, and those 3 other cards are going to dilute the encounter deck because his encounter deck is rough, it's annoying, it has tons of boost icons, tons of boost effects. So getting your Nemesis cards diluted in there is going to give you a lot of a breathing room and put a lot less pressure on you most of the time. So yeah, I always feel that way for the more difficult scenarios. I love getting the Shadow of the Past Nemesis cards into the encounter deck. So don't worry about Shadow of the Past most of the time if you're playing him on expert. Just let those cards and embrace it. Just let those cards go into the encounter deck, and they'll usually help out a little bit and give you a little bit more breathing room. But obviously, that's not every single time. Some heroes might have very nasty Nemesis cards, so it kind of depends on the hero. But most of the time, I think the majority of Nemesis cards are not as bad as Venom Goblin's cards. Okay, so let's take a look at his Venom Goblin cards, and then we'll take a look at the Symbiotic Strength and the recommended modular set, which is Goblin Gear. Okay, so the first card here is We Are One, and we're just going to kind of go through them pretty quickly here. So this is pretty simple. It's an attachment, right? So when it comes out, you attach the Venom Goblin. He gets +3 scheme, +3 attack, which is an insane stat. And this thing kind of stays forever unless you use his hero action to get rid of it. So having +3 scheme, +3 attack on expert, that means he has 5 scheme, he has 6 attack. That is terrible. A super high silent add to his thing. So usually you do want to get rid of it. If you have ways to mitigate it, I guess you could leave it in play. But I usually leave nasty villain attachments in play if they're like +1 attack or something like that and have some effect. But for this is one that I want to get rid of because this is like the nastiest attachment. Yeah, this attachment is not good. So it says hero action, spend energy, mental, and physical resources. This is pretty much normal. I think a lot of attachments have this type of thing. So you must do this in hero form where you discard or spend these 3 resources to discard this card. But the biggest difference between this card and every other attachment that has that is right here. It says printed resources. So you cannot use wild resources to generate these things. You have to spend the printed resource of energy, mental, and physical to discard this card, which makes it a lot harder to do. It's definitely still not impossible, but when you're doing that, you're usually not doing much in that turn anyways because it's a lot of resources. But yeah, I mean, this card, when you get it out right away, it's not a lot of pressure because he doesn't really do anything. He just gets this crazy style that you want to get rid of immediately. So it can be not the worst thing, but obviously it's not a good card to get. It's one of the more, if not the most, like nasty attachment in the game with +3 scheme and +3 attack. Okay, so let's look at his minions here. So Venom Goblin actually has tons of minions. He has a Symbiotic Berserker, 2 of them, Symbiotic Monstrosity, and he has 4 Symbiotic Thralls. And that's not including the encounter sets. So this is already what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minions, and they all have. So I'm actually taking a look at the boost effects first. They have super nasty boost effects that kind of mess with how you're gonna play him. So let's take a look at the Symbiotic Berserker. So boost effect here, move the glider counter to the main scheme with the most threat, place 1 threat on that scheme. So the boost effect happens in the middle of the activation, right? So that means if Venom Goblin, if you already set 1 scheme to be low because you want the outer glider counter to move on that scheme for whatever reason, if you get this as his boost effect, before the activation happens and before his force response will happen, right? Because this happens after the activation, right? So this happens right whenever you review the boost card. Let me go back to it. Move the glider counter to the main scheme with the most threat. So you're already moving the glider counter to the scheme with the most threat, and you place 1 threat on that scheme. So most of the time, this one is not going to affect that much because putting 1 threat on the most threat scheme will usually still allow you to move the active glide icon to a scheme with the least threat, but this is very annoying if it pops that scheme, right? So you don't ever want to leave all of his schemes one away from popping whenever it's going into his turn, because this can just end your game and just get a symbiotic environment into play. And the symbiotic berserk himself, he's a, actually let's just take a look at all the boost effects first. So that's his boost effect. And then next we have the symbiotic thrall's boost effect. Place 1/3 on each main scheme without the glider counter. So this one is one of the worst ones. I think this one's definitely worse than this boost effect, right? Because this is manipulating possibly what is the scheme that has the least threat that you want, right? So you're putting 1/3 on each main scheme without the glider counter. If the glider counter is a scheme that has, I don't know, 0 threat, or let's say that the glider counter is a scheme that has 1/3 on it, right? And all the other schemes have, let's say 0 threat. Or, okay, let's say the scheme that you want to move it to has 0 threat, and then the other scheme has like 5 threat, right? If you place actually that will change it. I'm not sure. Okay, let me try to think of a scenario, because I know this happened many times where this boost effect changes where I want to put the main scheme. So if okay, I got it. So if the current main scheme that you have has 0 threat, and the scheme that you want to put it on also has 0 threat, right? Because you know that after Venom Goblin activates, if the schemes are tied, it will still move, right? It has to move to, if it can. So the scheme you want to move it on has 0 threat, and then the scheme it's currently on has 0 threat. If you get this as a boost effect, it puts 1/3 on each scheme without the glider counter. So the scheme that you want to put it on now has 1 threat, which is now more than the current active glider main scheme. So the active glider counter will no longer move. And this boost effect will stop that. And if it's an effect that you really don't want, like discarding a card from your hand or putting 1/3 on each scheme or whichever, then this could kind of ruin that turn, and it could be very detrimental. So basically, you always want to try to have at least 2 threat threshold between each schemes for whichever one that you want to trigger. But you won't always be able to get that, obviously, because Venom Goblin is putting so much pressure on you. It's not the easiest thing to manipulate the main schemes, but it's something to keep in mind that this can really mess you up, and he has 4 of these guys in here with 4 of these boost effects. And next, let's take a look at Symbiotic Monstrosity. So this is the strongest, and this is the only elite minion in Venom Goblin's kit. So the boost effect here is if this activation is an attack, this attack deals indirect damage. So not only does he have the 3 boost icons, right? These guys don't have any boost icons, they just have boost effects. His attack is dealing indirect damage. So if you're having an ally chump block for 1, man, Venom Goblin is hitting you for at least 6 here, because with the 3+3, so you have to take at least 5 damage on your hero. Yeah, this is a very nasty boost effect. If you get it as a scheme, I mean, it's still bad because it's 3, but at least it's not gonna force indirect damage all over you. And if you get him as an encounter card, yeah, he has a lot of text right here. He's Retaliate 1, Steady, and Toughness. And he has 6 hit points, so he's a pretty nasty guy. Yeah. And then let's take a look at all the minions here, and they all have an effect that makes them stronger if a symbiote environment is in play, which is super thematic, right? Because if Venom Goblin has taken over one of these parts of Manhattan, then all of his minions are a little bit stronger, and they have an additional effect. So Symbiotic Berserker, 0 scheme, 3 attack, 5 hit points. His effect is while symbiote environment is in play, he has Quick Strike. So he's hitting for 3 if he has Quick Strike, which is very nasty. 5 hit points is high. The 0 scheme is great because then I'm often flipping down to Arch Eagle if I can't hit him right away to have him scheme, because he doesn't affect anything with his 0 scheme. Then the Symbiotic Thrall is a scheme of 1 to attack, 4 hit points. So still a medium-sized minion. He has guard, so you gotta make sure that you get rid of him if you're gunning Venom Goblin down. And while symbiote environment is in play, he has Patrol. This gets really nasty if you have a bunch of these guys with Patrol, because then you can't thwart the main schemes. And then right here with the symbiote environments, the main schemes are accumulating probably more threat every single turn. So this is just super duper nasty, especially if a symbiote environment is in play. And for Symbiotic Monstrosity, his effect's not the worst. It just says while symbiote environment is in play, he gets +3 hit points. So he will have 9 hit points instead of 6. So the Symbiotic Monstrosity is actually not that bad a lot of the times, right? He comes in with Retaliate, Steady, and Toughness, so he has all that stuff, but he only has 2 schemes to attack. So I really evaluate whenever I get him, is it worth getting rid of his 6 hit points or his 9 hit points through Retaliate and Toughness, or just taking 2 attack or 2 scheme per turn? Like, how close am I to gunning the villain down? How many turns can I take this 2 scheme to attack without contributing resources to get rid of him with his nasty, high hit points and retaliate and toughness, right? So he's not too much immediate pressure. The pressure will really climb over time if you are taking this 2 scheme to attack throughout several turns. But I think that especially in the beginning, he looks overwhelming, but he's actually a minion that's not that terrible to get. And you do want to eventually deal with him, but you can really take your time with it and find the correct turn to really just get him down in one shot, like with a big attack card, like let's say a Spider-Man swing, web kick, or something like that, right? Until you have the resources to set aside for him, I think he's okay to actually leave him play for a little bit. This guy you don't want leaving play if you're in hero form because of his 3 attack, which is nasty. If you're going to flip him Archer Ego, it's fine, leave him in play. And this guy you generally don't want to leave him in play because if there's a way for Symbiote Environment to come out, he'll have Patrol, which is going to be very nasty. And he's going to be scheming or attacking every single turn. And obviously, this guy is a lot easier to get rid of than this guy because less hit points, no retaliate, no toughness. So I would definitely focus on getting rid of Symbiotic Thralls if you are, if you have them out. The Symbiotic Berserker is okay to get rid of, but if you're flipping down, you can leave him out a little bit longer. And then for Symbiotic Monstrosities, I mean, if you can contribute the resource to him, then it's fine. If not, it's okay to leave him out a little bit longer. Okay, so let's take a look at, he only has 4 other cards in his deck here, and he has 2 side schemes. So let's take a look at these side schemes. So Festering Mass, while there are no other Symbiote environments in play, this card is considered a Symbiote environment, comes with 5 threat, and acceleration icon. So I completely hate this side scheme. This is the worst side scheme to me in his encounter deck. So just like before, we're talking about these symbiotic environments here, right? This is the other way for Venom Goblin to get a symbiote environment in play. When this card is out, all those triggers on the main scheme that we saw earlier, let's go back up to them. So if Upper Manhattan triggers is special, you would discard 1 card from hand, and if Festering Mass is out, that is a symbiote environment. So you have to also discard top 4 cards of your deck. So Festering Mass is a way for Venom Goblin to be triggering those symbiote environments. And a really nasty thing about this is that the boost effect says to review this card. So if you don't get it as an encounter card, you're going to get it as a boost effect, unless you have a way to discard from the encounter deck. I mean, this card is coming out. So 5 threat is nothing to scoff at. It's pretty annoying to get. And I'm not the biggest fan of this card. If you do have something like One Way or Another, which grab this card from the encounter deck and you can get rid of it in one go, it'll definitely help out because this will affect how everything plays, right? Getting it as a boost effect means that whenever this comes out, it comes in the middle of Venom Goblin's activation. So whenever he triggers the special, which activates the specials on the main schemes, the symbiote environment will be in play and you'll get that terrible effect if this comes out as a boost card. So I would definitely prefer this as an encounter card instead of a boost effect because then in addition to activation, he's getting this out for free. So super duper nasty card, the Festering Master. And I do want to note that it says while there are no other symbiote environments in play, so he needs 2 symbiote environments to win the game, but if he has one out through taking over one of the main schemes, this will no longer be a symbiote environment. So if he already has a symbiote environment, this is not that bad anymore because it just has this acceleration here. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. You don't need to focus too much on removing threat from the scheme if he already has a symbiote environment in play, because this really isn't doing anything after that. But usually if Manhattan is still clean, it's still not taken over by the symbiotes, then you want to get rid of this as soon as possible. Okay, so next we have Joyride. This is another side scheme with hinder 2 times player threat. And then it comes up with 2 threat here. When reviewed, move the Glider token to the main scheme with the most threat, resolve that scheme's special ability, and this has a hazard icon. So yeah, obviously Venom Goblin is super difficult, so obviously he's gonna have all these difficult side schemes. It comes out right away. You don't think it's that bad because it's just a side scheme with a hazard icon, right? And you get rid of this hazard icon right away before it does anything. But the one reviewed is to move the Glider token to the main scheme with the most threat and then resolve the special. So resolving that special on whatever scheme has the most threat now is not what you planned. You weren't ready for that because we're usually setting stuff for whatever's on the least threat. And then there's no point in preparing for this because if you're trying to prepare for this constantly, you're not preparing for the scheme to activate on the one with the least threat. So this kind of puts another foil in my strategy. And yeah, it makes it very hard to manage. But this is just one card. So if this card's already out, you don't have to worry about it. And then, yeah, if it comes out, most of the time it's not going to be the worst thing, but just getting that in a side scheme is terrible, just resolving that scheme special all the time. So this is still not a fun card that you want to get. Okay, and next we have the Spreading Panics here, and this is actually my most hated card in Venom Goblin's kit here. So this card has Surge. When revealed, resolve the special ability of the scheme with the glider counter. So it's not, it didn't seem that bad, right? You're just gonna resolve the special one time. But the thing is, that one special resolving will usually affect something, right? Is you're gonna have you take damage, have you discard a card, or have you or have put more threat on each scheme. And the thing is, whatever special that the scheme with the glider counter is on, probably just activated, right? If you're getting this card as an encounter card, Venom Goblin just activated against you. He activated that special, and now you're gonna activate it again, right? So if you have 5 cards in your hand and you plan to discard one, so you discard one card, you have 4 cards left because you activated the special. This will activate again. So now you discard another card, and now you only have 3 cards left in your hand, and you might not be able to play anything anymore, right? If you took 2 indirect damage because you planned that way for an ally to take some indirect damage and still survive, this will trigger that again. You gotta take another 2 indirect damage. So now you might actually have to take damage. You might have to defeat that ally. And then if it's adding threat on each scheme, this will put another threat on every single scheme. So adding 2 threats to every single scheme is pretty bad because that's going to be 6 total threat, right? It has a terrible, terrible boost effect, right? Resolve the special ability of the scheme with the glider counter, right? If you get it as a boost, it's going to activate that special. If it's the one that adds 1 threat on each scheme, that might affect something. Yeah, this is a super nasty boost effect, just constantly activating those specials on the 3 main schemes. Yeah, super duper nasty. I do not like this card. So if you take a look at Venom Goblin's kit, they're all pretty nasty cards, and they all resolve these special effects or change how the threat happens and occurs on the 3 main schemes. So Venom Goblin, he's always trying to mess with those main schemes, and as the player, I think it's our job to try to manage that as best that we can. Oh, and one thing I do want to mention is the initial starting threat on the main schemes. So lower mid-hand will start off with 1 times player threat, mid-hand starts off with 2 times player threat, and upper mid-hand will start off with 0 threat. So upper mid-hand is usually going to be the one that his first activation will go to. So on turn 1, I always try to manipulate the main schemes by threading out or thwarting from lower mid-hand to get this to be the scheme that has the least threat to activate the special. If you want on mid-hand mid-hand, then I would thwart from here. If you're okay taking that discard, then it's fine just leaving the threat how it is for the first turn. But yeah, I feel like this is the worst one to take early game, like I was mentioning earlier, because that discard is brutal early game if you don't have anything set up, because then you don't have the economy to play your cards early game. Okay, so yeah, those are Venom Goblin's cards. Super duper nasty. Let's take a look at his modular sets here, right? So you have to include Symbiotic Strength when you're playing him, and then the recommended is Goblin Gear. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one here. Goblin Gear. Did we go through Symbiotic Strength? Okay, so here's Symbiotic Strength, and then we'll look at Goblin Gear afterwards. So this modular set you have to include whenever you're playing him. This modular set is actually kind of a saving grace in Venom Goblin. There are 3 really nasty cards, but the other ones give you a lot more breathing room. So this actually also makes Venom Goblin a lot more difficult to rush, because a lot of these cards kind of dissuade that. But if you're building out against them, which I'm usually doing, a lot of these cards are not as bad. So I just go through them a little bit quicker than Venom Goblin's actual cards. So improvised weapons attaches attachment to the villain. It just has an amplify icon, and you can spend 1 of each resource type to discard it. So not as bad as the We Are One card at all. It's just going to be amplified. You can just leave it in play. I usually just leave these in play. It could be really bad if he's getting multiple boost cards, which he does. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's pretty easy to get rid of. It doesn't have to be the printed resources, right? So you can use wilds here to get rid of it. Violent Tendencies is another attachment attached to the villain. After he takes any amount of damage from an attack, give him 1 face-down boost card. If the attack does 3 or more, then you can discard this card. So if he gets this, it's usually fine early game because you're not trying to attack him anyways. But if you do attack him, he'll get a bunch of boost cards, which can be nasty. So just make sure the next attack that you do is 3 or more. And the webbed up here is an attachment. It's the copy of Spider-Man Peter Parker's webbed up. So it's very funny here. Attached to your identity. So now you're webbed up. When your hero would attack, this card webbed instead, then you are stunned. So it's blocking you for 2 attack activations. And the boost effect here is you are stunned. If you're already stunned, take 2 damage. So luckily, he has no other way, I believe. Yeah, he has no other way in his kit to stun you. So this boost effect is pretty much almost always going to just give you a stun. So the thing with these 3 cards is that the boost effects don't have as much synergy with Venom Goblin. And if you get them out as an attachment, that's 0 pressure that turn, right? This webbed up is going to stop you from attacking, but you can still thwart. Divine Tendencies just goes on Venom Goblin and nothing else happens, and the Improvised Weapons just goes on and nothing else happens, right? So these 3 cards you do have to manage eventually, but getting them out, especially early game, is not bad at all, especially if you're trying to set up your board, like what I was mentioning. So these cards, I love seeing these cards, especially as my encounter cards. It definitely helps out having these dilute the encounter deck. Next, we have the Enraged Symbiote. So this is a minion with 1 scheme, 2 attack, 2 hit points, and he has guard and patrol. So, it's pretty nasty with the guard and patrol, but he only has 2 hit points. So most heroes can get rid of him with 1 attack. If not, even an ally can help get rid of it with 1 attack. So this guy I don't mind as much. I love getting him as a face-down counter card because he's super easy to manage off of the board, right? He's not the most annoying guy in there, and he definitely dilutes the encounter deck. One really nasty thing is if you get him as a boost effect, it is absolutely terrible. Because the boost effect is to put Enraged Symbiote into play engage with you. So now, not only did you miss that opportunity to get him as a face-down counter card, where he's not giving you that much pressure, but is that after Venom Goblin activates, he's going to activate right away. So if Venom Goblin attacks you, he gets it as his boost effect. This guy's going to attack you right after. If Venom Goblin scheming, this guy's going to scheme as well. So he has a very nasty boost effects, but hopefully you can get him as an encounter card because that is not as bad. And he is still easy to manage even if you get him as a boost effect. It's just that activation hurts. Yeah, but he is not a bad minion at all. And then we have the Swinging Assault. So this is just basically an attack activation. It'll cause him to attack you. If it's in Alter Ego, you change hero form, he attacks. If you're in hero form, he attacks you and he gets another boost card. So not the worst card. It's pretty standard in a lot of decks here. It's just the only difference is that he's attacking you in Alter Ego as well, but he flips you over to hero form so you can't defend and stuff. So yeah, I mean, Swing Assault I don't think is the worst card. It just has boost icons here. So once again, still not very bad. And then next we have the Unstable Sentience. This card is not the best, right? But it doesn't have the craziest thing. It's the boost effect that's really nasty for this card. So the one review is just give the villain 1 face-down boost card and it'll surge. So not the worst thing if you have a way to mitigate his damage. And then the boost effect here is if this activation is an attack, this card gets +2 boost icons for this attack and the attack gains overkill. So yeah, if you get this as a scheme, it's great because it has no boost effect pretty much, right? But if it's an attack, that could be very nasty. This card with the overkill could end your game, and yeah, I would be very mindful of the Unstable Sentience and combined with the symbiotic monstrosity that we talked about earlier for his boost effect, right? These are the only 2 boost effects in Venom Goblin's deck where you cannot chump block, right? That means having an ally block for you and not take any damage. So these are kind of the only 2 cards that you need to look out for, the symbiotic monstrosity and the boost effect of the Unstable Sentience. So yeah, I don't mind this Mars set at all. I think it's fine and it's thematic, right? You have these symbiotes, symbiotic strength, in addition to Venom Goblin, because he does have the symbiotes on his side. So yeah, I think that is a pretty good module set, and it's not an easy module set, but it makes Venom Goblin easier because he is very difficult. And then lastly, let's take a look at his recommended module set, which is the Goblin Gear. So these 6 cards right here. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into the Advanced Glider. So the Advanced Glider is probably the worst attachment in the game. It's right up there with Ronin's Fanaticism. This card is absolutely terrible. So if you get this as an encounter card, you attach it to the villain. So probably Venom Goblin if you're facing, Venom Goblin. As a force response, after attached villain activates against you, it activates against you again, limit once per round per player. So basically, after Venom Goblin attacks you, he's going to attack again. If he schemes because you're an Alter Ego, he's going to scheme again, right? If he gets in advance and he schemes, he's going to activate again. So if you're in Alter Ego, then he's going to scheme again. If you're in hero form, he's going to, after getting the advance and scheme, he's going to attack you now, right? Because you're in hero form. This is so nasty. If you have him stunned, or if you don't have him stunned or confused, he is going to be activating 2 times minimum against you every single turn with this Advanced Glider, and he'll probably get more activations, right? Getting the other cards that we saw earlier. I'm not gonna go back to them, or getting an assault or an advance, right? So it's so bad, and it's even worse with Venom Goblin because he gets so much stuff from activations, right? Because of his force responses. So not only is he activating against you like crazy, he's getting all those responses every single time he activates. Yeah, this card has so much synergy with Venom Goblin. Super nasty. Definitely one of the worst attachments in the game, if not the worst one. And as a hero action, discard any number of attack cards from your hand with a combined resource cost of 3 or more to discard this card. So you must do this in hero form. You want to do this as soon as possible, right when this comes out. If you take more than 5 turns of this card, I don't think any hero is surviving. But yeah, so you want to make sure when you're facing Venom Goblin that you have attack events with a cost of 3 or more, right? This is super duper important. Yeah, and it doesn't actually have to be attack events, it just has to be attack cards, right? I'm not sure if there's any events that aren't attack cards, but yeah, you just want to make sure that you have this to get rid of the advanced glider because it's a super nasty card, and that's why I like heroes that have one attack or that have attack cards that are just 3 cost events, right? Because then if you have 3 copies of it, for example, like Spider-Man Swing Web Kick, you just discard 1 and get rid of the advanced glider. If you're playing a hero that doesn't have that innate in their kit, you might want to put that in through an aspect card to help you out. If not, then like for Miles Morales, you have to discard 2 web shots to get rid of the advanced glider, which could be a lot more difficult to do because you need 2 of his cards in your hand. But yeah, I mean, this card is super nasty. You definitely want to get rid of it as soon as possible. Probably, and this card is what makes Goblin Gear known to be a very difficult modular set because of the advanced glider. Next, let's actually jump over here and we're going to take a look at the last card in Goblin Gear, Remote Navigation. This is a treachery card. When reviewed, if advanced glider is in play, the villain activates against you. So that's not good because obviously, he's going to activate again with the advanced glider. And then if it is not in play, and do want to note that the advanced glider only activates once per round per player, right? So when I say he activates against you again, if he gets it as encounter card, it'll be assuming that you stun or confuse him. But if you didn't, then obviously he'll just activate one more time with the advanced glider, so 3 activations. But yeah, I mean, anyways, it's only once per round per player, so you don't have to, worry about that too much, I guess. And then it says, if the advanced glider is in play, he activates against you. If it's not in play, you search the encounter deck and discard power for the advanced glider and reveal it. So if you dealt with the advanced glider already and you get this as an encounter card, it'll bring it back into play. Or if you haven't dealt with it, it'll just tutor it straight out. So this card is super nasty as well. It just synergizes with the advanced glider, just bringing it straight out into play, and then you have to deal with it. Super nasty card as well. Pretty much the same level as the advanced glider because it is the advanced glider effectively. And the boost effect is to give the villain 2 additional boost cards for his activation, which is super nasty as well. And this actually synergizes a lot with the amplify icon from Symbiotic Strength. So if you have improvised weapons out and you think that you can, it's not that bad, and then you get this remote navigation where he gets 2 additional boost cards, whether it's a scheme activation or an attack, it's going to be at least 3 more icons because of the amplify. So that is one thing to look out for as well. You definitely want to get rid of the remote navigation and advanced glider as soon as possible. Okay, so other than those 2 cards, the other cards in Goblin Gear, I actually do not mind. I think that these cards also help dilute the encounter deck, and these cards are pretty good encounter cards or boost cards to get because they are definitely not bad at all. So let's take a look at these 3 bomb cards right here, right? Concussive bombs, incendiary bombs, and smoke bombs. They all have very similar effects. It's just the force response is a little bit different. But basically, each time you get one, you attach the villain. It gives the villain +1 attack as long as it's in play, and they all have 2 bomb counters. And then every single time the villain attacks you, right? So force response after the villain attacks you, remove 1 bomb counter from here. Each one of them has that same effect. For the concussive bombs, it says exhaust 1 upgrade 1 support you control. Incendiary bombs take 2 indirect damage, and smoke bombs discard one event from your hand with the lowest cost. So I mean it's not the worst thing because if you get it as an encounter card, there's no immediate pressure. If you're in Arch Eagle and the villain schemes, this won't activate, right? It's only activates if the villain attacks you, so it's not that bad. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that these cards are that bad, and especially for exhausting and upgrade and support, right? If you only have 1 upgrade or only 1 support, or you don't have any, then you don't have to use this effect. You can choose which one you exhaust. You just must exhaust 1 upgrade and 1 support if you can. But either way, the bomb counter will still go off even if you can't. And then for here, same thing, the bomb counter goes off. You take 2 indirect damage. You can put them however you want, which is not the best, but it only happens 2 times because there's only 2 bomb counters. And for this one is discard 1 event from your hand with the lowest cost. If you discard a bomb counter and there's no event from your hand, that's fine. You don't have to discard anything, which is super duper great whenever that happens. So yeah, I mean, they're not great obviously, but they are a lot easier than Venom Goblin's actual cards, and I think that these help you dilute the encounter deck. And next we have the only other side schemes. So I think there's a total of 3 side schemes here if you play them the recommended way. Limitless Supply is a hazard icon, 5 threat. Each tech attachment gains surge. So the only tech attachments are these 4 cards right here. And obviously, if you get the remote navigation, it reviews the advanced glider. So this is a tech attachment, and it's going to gain that surge if you remote navigation and have Limitless Supply in play. This card also isn't bad immediately, right? If you just get it like by itself, because you can get rid of it immediately by removing that 5 threat and then getting rid of the hazard icon and the surge on tech attachment. So this card's also not as bad, and it's not as much pressure if you get it right away. So yeah, that is the Goblin gear here. I think Goblin gear has a pretty bad rap. I think overall it is pretty terrible and definitely one of the hardest modular sets in the game because of the advanced glider and the remote navigation. But these cards help dilute it a little bit. And yeah, that is my analysis of Venom Goblin. I hope if any of you guys are planning on taking Venom Goblin down soon, I hope that this video helped. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments there. And yeah, thank you guys so much once again for 700 subscribers. I'm super duper appreciative of all of you guys. Yeah, and I'm so excited to see where this community goes. And I'm so excited for all of the discussions that we always have as well. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.